Welcome back to the Stablecoin podcast. I'm your host, Luther Madej, head of payments at the Algorand Foundation and co-founder of Stablecoin Partners.
And I'm Rami Solomon, president at GMO Trust and co-founder of Stablecoin Partners.
Today, we get to sit down with Daniel Lev, CEO and co-founder of Coinflow Labs, whose work is redefining merchant payments with instant stablecoin settlements via traditional rails. Effectively, they're blending blockchain speed with real-world reliability. Before we get started, the views expressed here are those of the hosts and guests and do not reflect their organizations. This episode is for information purposes only and not to be deemed as legal, financial, or investment advice. With that, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Yeah, I remember not too long ago, there was no podcast talking about stablecoins. Now there's podcasts that are just solely focused on it, which is pretty exciting and crazy where like we've come in such a short amount of time from just building this infrastructure and all knowing about it collectively here and then being able to like actually broadcast to the world and they want to listen now. So I'm excited to be here and I'm excited there's the Stablecoin podcast.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it is crazy how quickly the tide has turned from where we were almost like a year ago, and everybody was like, there's nothing happening here in the space in the US, like everything is in the other parts of the world, like Abu Dhabi where Rami lives, etc. And like all of a sudden, like there's just this impetus of action and all these headlines that are going around the usage of it, the acceptability of it, the all of a sudden the trillions of dollars of volumes. But it is super exciting. It's a great place to be, and not going to lie from that perspective. But before we get started, Daniel, like I think, there's those of us who have lived in the space for longer than others. Like I've been here for about 3 years, starting with my time in MoneyGram, but you've really been an OG in this space. Like, can you kind of help us understand your transition into this space, like how Coinflow came about?
Yeah, for sure. So like quick background on me, like my background in software engineering. Even in school over a decade ago, I started playing around with Bitcoin, and then after Bitcoin came smart contracts, and I thought those like the idea of escrow contracts are programmable makes sense to everyone. And then so I started using those in college. After college, went to consulting, primarily PwC and other strategy consulting shops. After that, went to like traditional fintech startups, saw those scale, and then I started messing around with the new performant L1s that were starting to come around. Predominantly Solana. I actually built during the last fintech I was at before going full Web3. The fintech scaled from Series A to Series D. I was leading product teams, became a unicorn, and then I started having more time on my hands as my team got bigger. And that's right around the time when Solana came out and started really getting prolific. One of the big pain points, which really isn't a pain point today, but 4 or 5 years ago was that Ethereum started to get really expensive. I built a couple of apps in college. One of them was a fantasy football app. So for the people listening in the US, huge concept here. Football season starting in a few days here. And there's usually something called a commissioner. The commissioner of the fantasy football league is the one who collects all the money. And at the end of the season, which is 5-6 months away, they pay everyone out. Seems like a pretty good idea for like a smart contract where it's trustless. The commissioner, if you're in college, your fraternity brother can't run away or spend that money on beer money. So I try to make that in college, but Ethereum is expensive. Let's go into calculating things off beers. If the cost of a gas fee is $5, that's a few beers at the college bar. So people weren't really trying to pay that. And then when I saw Solana come out and say, hey, the transaction is a fraction of the penny, and you can still offer the cost or the value prop of doing whatever that is in the smart contract. For my use case, it was keeping that money there safe, secure, without someone being able to take it. And you can build these consumer apps. So I actually built a consumer app, scaled to hundreds of thousands of users in the fantasy sports world, raised VC money, etc. But the biggest pain point is like people needed to have stable coins to interact with the smart contract. But my users were traditional users, like my friends, my fraternity house, my girlfriend, etc., that had no idea how to use stable coins. So they needed a way to accept credit cards or use credit cards, and then the smart contract does its thing on the back end of the infrastructure. And at that point, the crypto was like really just heavy infra talking about these use cases. But we had hundreds of thousands of users, and we like had to come up with a solution because people like were churning left and right. So I searched the market like far and wide. We even saw used probably every on-ramp in the space. Nothing worked at the same level of Web2 conversion. So I was like, okay, we have to build something in-house. And that was literally where Coinflow was born. We just built something where you could take in cards and swipe your card. And on the back end, the infrastructure of stablecoins and smart contracts gave the value prop of the application, but users didn't know what was going on. So yeah, that's where Coinflow was born. People started asking us for that infrastructure, like, who are you guys using? We're like, made in-house. And then I was like, oh my gosh, we got to spin this off as a separate company. Sold that last business, started Coinflow about 2.5 years ago. And the rest is kind of history. We're processing billions of dollars a year now, hundreds of merchants. And yeah, that's a long, I won't go into more because I know we're talking about the rest of it, but that's the background. So yeah, I've seen the space transition a lot in the last half a decade. And yeah, I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface.
I love that you started with a really like a use case that needed this functionality but didn't really have it, right? And fantasy football is pretty near and dear to my heart, primarily because I'm one of those guys that usually hits the auto pick option, which is what I know, because like I don't do my research ahead of time, and so anytime I'm sitting down, they're like, "All right, Luther, it's your turn." I'm like, "Auto draft," So
I'm a big fan of fantasy soccer, so we have the same thing for
Yeah.
the Premier League. So been playing that for 20 years with mediocre results consistently. But what I love about what you're doing is you've found that elegant solution where this is where stablecoins ought to be. They ought to be in the background. People don't really need to know that they exist, actually, but you need to give the UX of Web 2 this experience where people can fund with a familiar source, credit card swipe, pay, but all the clever stuff is happening in the background, but they just see the benefit. I think, melding that together, that's been generally the failure of crypto, is that they haven't really truly abstracted away the complexities, but you've elegantly put the complexities in to show the benefit without sort of a negative impact to the consumer, just consuming the product. So yeah, kudos to you guys.
Appreciate it, man. I agree. Like that's been one of the main failures of like crypto companies generally, is historically very infra focused without like real world businesses being able to build on top of it. And yeah, probably for many reasons that's the case. But yeah, now I think different cohort of builders that understand like there has to be an actual value add to the average consumer. Or
Yeah.
a consumer. It doesn't have to be an average consumer. It has to be someone that actually pays for your product, that sees a value prop outside of it being on a blockchain. That doesn't really add value.
Yeah, agree.
when it comes to the product itself, Daniel, like there's you guys offer global payments, digital marketplaces, etc. The part that I think I want to underline is that usually people say, "Oh, just use stablecoins," but you're not saying that, right? You're actually saying you can start in the thing that you used for 25 years, right? And I love the fact that you're not forcing people to a new kind of behavior that they weren't used to, but you're leveraging what they already have, right? And then you're kind of introducing the infrastructure in a place where I think most people struggle, or they actually do the wrong thing where they say, "Okay, I know you're doing it this way. Go ahead and change everything that you've ever done." And they're like, "Why? Like, if it's not broken, why fix it?" But I love what you're actually doing is you're actually easing them into stablecoin usage without actually forcing them to use stablecoins up front. Can you talk a little bit more about that from a Coinflow perspective?
Yeah. So at a high level, Coinflow is a global payment service provider. And what that means is we take in different types of payment methods. Think about that as credit cards, debit cards, bank transfers, digital wallets. Like in the US, we have Venmo. In different parts of the world, it's like WePay, etc., and cryptocurrency. So we can take in all those forms of payments. Traditionally, a payment service provider settles to their merchants in 1 to 3 business days. So if you make a payment today on Tuesday, the merchant gets their money Thursday, Friday, sometimes longer, right? The payment service provider settles in fiat currencies. It has a whole assortment of currencies it can settle in: USD, euros, pounds, etc. The list goes on. Instead of all that, what we do is, instead of settling in fiat, which we can, we instantly settle to merchants within seconds in stablecoins. So what they see on their end is like, hey, Luther paid them for a good. It can be buying this iced tea. And as soon as I buy this iced tea, if I was the one that sold it to you, you bought it from me, in my account, I see $5. It displays as dollars. And under the hood, instead of being in some sub-ledgered FBO, which all money is digital anyways, instead of being in some ledgered FBO somewhere, digital bank account, it's just in a self-custodial or custodial wallet. And if the business wants to hit withdraw or send it to one of their employees, they can hit withdraw. We convert those stable coins and move it through real-time payment rails in the back end. So yeah, TLDR is we take in the same payment methods as the big payment service providers, the PayPals, the Stripes, the WorldPays, etc. But instead of waiting multiple days, we instantly give our merchants their money, and they can go from those dollars, those digital dollars, which are stable coins, back to their bank account instantly or their end users' accounts. So really just not waiting for money is one of the big things that is the main value prop that we do. And so yeah, I totally agree. Like stablecoins in the background, the value prop's super clear. It's like, hey, do you want to wait multiple days to get your money? or do you want to get it instantly? And it starts to really compound in use cases that there's multiple buyers and sellers, or there's multiple people. So in this use case, I bought an iced tea. You as a business owner, you might need that cash flow. You might not care about waiting 2-3 days. It's still nice at getting it. You can start earning yield. You can spend, etc. But if you sold me this at a cafe, and you as a worker got a tip, I said, "Hey, Luther is awesome. He smiled at me. Super nice guy. I'm gonna give him an extra $1 as tip." You as an employee don't want to wait 2, 3, 4 days to get that payment. So what we could do is split that instantly, give it to you in stablecoins. In the back end, right? And in your end, you just see it as a digital wallet, similar to any other bank dashboard you have. And you can instantly withdraw and get the value, or you could spend off of it in a card. So having this like marketplace-like solution where there's multiple parties involved, the more complex the transaction is, the better to have stablecoins in the back end infra. And it really starts adding like that real world utility. Like you're a worker that gets tips. That's probably where majority of your revenue comes from, or not revenue, but like your lifeblood as an employee, your wages, and you have to pay for things. And if that's constantly taking extra 3, 4, 5 days to get there, like that sucks. So that's where really we're seeing the use cases. And to the business, like you said, they're not changing anything. Same payments, same acceptance. We can even usually add a few acceptance methods like accepting stablecoins, accepting Bitcoin, but everything else, same UX. The benefit is your employees, your sellers, whoever your people are in the back end, just get paid way faster.
What options of programmability do you give your customers? Because, each one could have a really custom workflow. How do you sort of manage that? Because it could go into multiple layers of complexity. In your example, just sort of the cafe, and you're splitting out the merchant and then the waitress and so on. That's 2 levels, but that's at the simple end. In a very complex business, it may be multiple levels. Do you allow for that, or do you sort of regiment it, or give sort of layers of complexity, or how do you scale that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can get ever complex. We're starting to see a lot of like these flows of funds that weren't possible before get built on top of us. I would say we have rudimentary things that get asked. Basically, if customers like this, like the split payment, when there's one merchant, so typically a marketplace or like restaurant or whatever it is, and another, let's call it seller on the marketplace, that we have via API. But anything deeper than that, you need to build on top of. The nice thing about this is it's all like, you're programming between wallets and smart contracts. You don't have to go ask for, this API key or whatever it is. Like you can just go build it on this composable network. And then there are other tools, and hopefully as these, as this ecosystem expands, there's other types of providers you can compose with. For example, like in that flow of funds in the restaurant, we can settle to a stablecoin wallet. That can be a Privy wallet, a MetaKeep wallet, the list goes on. And then we can issue a card off that wallet balance with someone like Rain, who's a partner of ours. So we don't actually have to go build it ourselves, or the merchant has to go build it themselves. We can just introduce them to a few providers, and they're not locked in. They can go find the best one. So yeah, some of it we have natively built into the platform, and other parts of it is like, hey, like you're free to go do whatever, and it's composable in nature. So it attracts developer types or people with developer teams. That's a lot of the place we're seeing a lot of the innovation is these places that want to go and invest in their flow of funds, see how they can make it more programmable. Because at that scale, if you're a big enterprise or anyone moving a lot of money, if you can increase your UX of payments, whether it's speed of getting your money, the programmability of it, the acceptance, whatever it is, if you can increase it by 1%, and let's just for simple math say you're doing $100 million a year, that's an extra $1 million of revenue. If you increase it by 5%, that's an extra 5. And those aren't huge like numbers to, have an increase in, right? So it's pretty cool to see people get into these like programmable flows and build on top of it, just because it does increase some bottom line KPI for them.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And you raised another good point, which is, and we've seen in our first interviews with Ben from Braille, there's a lot of ecosystem partners out there that are working well to offer complementary services. So yeah, whether it's Ben or Rain with Farouk and so on, they're doing a lot of cool things at the moment and all raising good money in their own right, building good products, and it fits nicely. Now, I feel like that part of the ecosystem, when you're speaking to someone who's not Web3 native, it's easier to give that sell now because it's a bit more developed, I would say, I think. And it's still quite complementary. People are working well together actually within the ecosystem.
One of the areas, so my background is with WorldPay, so in the merchant services space. Dan, I think we talked about this. The thing that I think often people kind of question when it comes to like instant settlement or through like the fact that this could be moved immediately is the risk that they have with exposure to potentially fraud, right? Like, so in the case of like chargebacks, etc., like what happens then? You and I both know, like all of us know, like the whole T+1 settlement, you get settled by Visa, net of chargebacks, and then you settle the merchant. Like when you're doing this instant settlement, how do you balance that risk of fraud or charge, even first party or third party fraud, with the fact that you can instantly settle now?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a few things here. Like, one, we kind of decouple settlement risk from chargeback risk because they are fairly separate items. For example, like the settlement risk is you saying like Visa or MasterCard selling to us T+1, which now they both publicly are saying, or at least one of the card networks is saying they're going to start settling 7 days a week. And, when one does something, the other one follows. So, which is great for us. And then the second part is, making sure that settlement is split out from the chargebacks. We typically see chargebacks come across the whole portfolio. I think it's like T plus after a transaction happens in like 22 days on average. So that risk doesn't exactly like correlate with us settling a day or two faster. Like that's completely separate. But the other part that we did realize is that when money is moving a lot faster, fraudsters are really appeal to that. There's a lot of things that you can do in this new age of stablecoins. And we built essentially our own models in-house with AI. So now we're using all the buzzwords, not only stablecoins, but also AI. We have essentially AI models as well that can predict based on all of our portfolio and other factors if someone is potentially going to do a chargeback and block that transaction. It's worked really well across, like even at scale. Our chargebacks are way lower than industry average. So that's another part. So most of our merchants are using this indemnified chargeback product, which means like any transaction that's approved by the model, over 95% are. They don't have to worry about any chargebacks. So it's like, hey, no chargebacks will keep all your revenue, plus get instant settlement. So the value prop's pretty great there. And then there's the third leg to supplement that model. Visa and MasterCard are doing some pretty cool things where you can actually, for the first time in your life, prove that something was delivered. Like everyone can prove that it was delivered for digital goods. What I mean by that is, let's say historically you bought, I can't use the same example because this is a physical good. But let's say this was an NFT of my iced tea, right? I bought a digital version, or if you're into NFTs, a digital sticker that you can send your mom, your friend, whoever. There's no really way of proving that you actually received that item from the merchant. It lives in some database. The merchant's going to say they got it, you got a receipt of it, etc. But with blockchains or public ledgers, or a lot of them are public ledgers, you can actually prove that something happened. So, for example, like let's say a traditional brokerage account, if I want to deposit in my Robinhood, no one can see that actually put the money there. The money is in some database, which is an FBO account at whoever Robinhood holds the money in, subledger under my name. But if you deposit onto Coinbase, and Coinbase has a separate wallet for me that has public address, you can actually see the stablecoins are delivered for that transaction and tie it back to the card purchase. So now for disputes with Visa and MasterCard, they're allowing us to show that proof that this was delivered in that user's wallet, and they can say, hey, Luther, I actually never got that purchase. I'm going to dispute it, because that's what first-party fraud is. You can use the same use case across video games like a Fortnite skin, etc. So for the first time ever, there's actually something that's neutral, where an analyst at Visa that's helping dispute a $20 charge can go and see, like, hey, the merchant did actually settle the user the funds or the good or service, and they did get it. So that's like the third thing that's like very nascent, but I think that has room to like completely disrupt how first-party fraud works. I think that's probably like $100+ billion savings across the industry if we can actually prove that what people are getting digitally is what they were supposed to buy, etc. So stuff like that. I'm excited, and we're starting to put that into our model, and it's working really well. Early innings. It's a huge, for anyone that's accepted payments as a merchant level, like they understand, or for anyone who's worked in payments and has to deal with fraud, like these are the things that really move the needle.
That's phenomenal.
It's amazing how much, like, to your point, a lot of people don't realize how much it affects the bottom line to reduce the cost. And because you're using the traditional card acceptance, etc., you also get to apply the existing ones like Cardlytics and some of these existing companies that have built, they didn't call it AI back then, but they called machine learning and etc., to actually be able to put models together to identify, right? Like, oh, Daniel just did a transaction in the US. There's no way he's doing one 2 minutes later in Singapore, right? There's something wrong here, kind of stuff, right? you also get to like leverage that part of it because you're kind of bridging these two kind of worlds together from that perspective. Not to mention like the know your transaction stuff ultimately, right? Like, is this wallet good? Is the funds in here good? No, I think that's amazing. Rami, you're about to say something.
I was going to ask, is this something you're certainly using internally at Coinflow? Will this end up being a customer feature as well? Is that something you'll be offering to your merchant and your consumer audience further down the line?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're already offering it to our merchants. It's just really a big data play, like connecting the card transaction to the on-chain transaction to what the merchant's selling and combining all these data points into one certain place so we could pass the card networks, pass to the bank, make sure that it's like the merchant's actually passing us the correct stuff. So yeah, we're offering that to our companies, but I think you really have to be like deeply involved in this. So it's not like something that can be built outside a payments company like Coinflow, just because you need to be so deeply involved in the whole flow of data. But yeah, something that we're offering to our merchants, and hopefully this just only like compounds because as Luther mentioned, and as you mentioned, fraud is really starting to impact merchants' bottom lines, and it's really crazy the amount of like friendly fraud that happens in the world. And friendly fraud, if people don't know, is like someone who actually received this item and then is just calling their bank and saying like, hey, I never got it, because they think they can win. And not only does the merchant have to then go fight it, they lose a lot even if they can prove they delivered it, which is because it's really hard to prove. They lose a lot. They get dinged by their banks sometimes, and if they pay a fee to Visa and MasterCard, plus they wasted time. So it's like a massive issue, and it doesn't scale linearly, because as soon as you start getting more, then you start like it becomes more expensive to pay these things, etc. So yeah, huge issue, and if we can solve that, it'd be awesome, both for like ourselves as a business to offer to merchants, but for merchants, because the first party fraud thing, like, pardon my language, is kind of BS, because these people like actually did give the service.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that in this day and age we like actually can't prove at scale that someone who paid for something as a business, that like they're somehow on the hook. It's really crazy to me. And whenever I tell people about it, they're like, why is the business on the hook? That makes zero sense if they actually did go do their service. So yeah, hopefully we can solve that. Maybe we do a catch up in a year on a new podcast and saying how we solved all this friendly fraud. That'd be great. But no, it's an ambitious thing, and I do think things like that open up these public ledgers as more data gets on there and can be visible and built on top and reconciled to everyone. These problems hopefully are solved, because yeah, it's crazy that people are giving value to consumers and then getting like scammed by their consumers.
Yeah,
It is crazy how much of a vicious cycle it is, right? So generally, a merchant signs up with the acquirer, etc., right? And then fraud starts happening for that particular merchant. Most of the time, it's really like completely out of their control, right? And so to your point, like, so then they get dinged by their acquirer, because like there's certain thresholds beyond which their acquirer has to say, we need to shut you down as a merchant, or like, you have to pay more fees, fines, whatever, right? And so that makes it costlier for the merchant, and then they end up going to a different acquirer, etc. But the net of it is that they pass all that on to the consumer, right? Like any additional costs that they incur, unfortunately, and so it ends up being just costlier for the consumer as a whole, right? So it is really sad to kind of see that aspect of it. But from an acquiring perspective, Daniel, like I understand the fact that you're allowing people to accept traditional rails. That totally makes sense. Is there is one kind of merchant type more accepting of being settled in USDC or USDT or different stablecoins versus receiving fiat?
Yeah, I would say, well, we abstract it all. So kind of like the analogy I give is like, let's say you use PayPal or Stripe and you have a dashboard. You as a merchant are typically getting money into that dashboard, which lives in some bank account somewhere. You as a user don't know where that bank account is, or necessarily like, typically ask. So that's kind of how we do it for our wallets. Like, we tell them about this stuff, but to them, it just looks like dollars, and they hit withdraw. If they want to move it to their bank account or they want to send it to a customer, it always goes to their customer's bank account. If they want to hit withdraw on stables, it goes there. So it just works, and people don't like necessarily question the fact that it's stablecoins in the hood. And we explain them just like this. We're like, hey, the stablecoins are just infrastructure that moves faster. And they get it. I think business types that really like these offerings are any marketplace. So digital marketplaces is a really good one because they have sellers. We have marketplaces that sell watches, whiskey, trading cards, services, courses, etc. And let's just say Rami sells me this watch on this digital marketplace in Abu Dhabi. Not that I can afford it, but if there's a nice watch in Abu Dhabi and he sells it to me, if I was on a watch marketplace, it'd take him like 3, 4, 5 days to get it. If Coinflow is processing it, you can swipe your card. We can get them stable coins instantly, and then if he hits withdraw, we can go to local currency instantly as well through a network of off-ramp providers. So that's the benefit to like these marketplace types. Remittance is another big category. Do a bunch of stuff in gaming as well for like skins, that kind of stuff, marketplaces. And then global e-commerce, I want to reconcile back into like US dollars and say we have like people selling pet food globally or something like that, and they want to get all their money back to the US instantly. So it can really be anything. The value prop of getting your money faster with less fraud is pretty appealing to most customers.
That makes sense. I could definitely see Rami selling watches. The image I had was Rami with like a long trench coat and like a bunch of watches inside on each side. Like,
You've seen Coming to America. Yeah, exactly. I'm that guy.
That's right.
Yeah. No, but I think the really, really interesting thing here is that the complaint, and my background has sort of worked in banks, and banks have always been generally anti-crypto because it's fraud and there's lots of bad stuff going on. It's full of bad actors. But what you've eloquently described is the transparency of the blockchain actually materially reduces fraud and materially proves provenance of transactions. We're taking it to the next stage. And, you only have to sort of Google bank fines for AML, KYC failures, and it's a list of all of the top names, that we've worked with or interacted with in the past. So I think you're demonstrating really an excellent use for how blockchains as, the ultimate ledger, for want of a better word, an ultimate ledger for provenance of data and sharing that data can be used not just for actually speed of transaction and speed of payment for merchant, seller, making sure the parties are there, but it's all the second order derivative stuff, basically the fraud. So when people are trying to screw you, trying to do the friendly frauds, you can't. We can show you the link. We can see where it went into the wallet. I wonder whether, I almost feel like we've just got a vision of the future. I think it's inevitable that in the future, everyone will probably just have a wallet or something, and it'll be an identifiable address that's public, and you can see everything going in and out, and no one's going to be able to question anything because it's just there. So no, it's really fascinating, really fascinating. I had one question I did have is, are you blockchain agnostic? I know you started your sort of career Ethereum, gas fees went high, you went into Solana. I saw you at the Solana breakpoint, so obviously you're doing a lot of stuff with the Solana ecosystem. Is the system blockchain agnostic, or are you welded to a particular blockchain?
Yeah, we're not blockchain agnostic, but we service tons of different blockchains. On like 10 plus EVM chains, Solana. I would say most of our volume happens to be on Solana. We have, as you said, like a really good foothold there, but yeah, we service wherever our customers want us to go, or merchants, we can go and settle there. It's up for them to make something cool on top of the application layer, wherever chain that is. So yeah, fairly indifferent there, as long as they're public blockchains. That's currently what we build on.
Okay, that makes sense. And I saw a LinkedIn post where you mentioned that sort of, I think, is it right that 70% of your business is in the US? Has that been a recent shift from last year, or has that always been the demographic since inception, irrespective of the genius and all the positive momentum of last year?
It's always been that. So that made my life really hard for the last 2 years prior to the last 8 months. But I think we got it right. You have to kind of you have to grind through years of pain to be an overnight success when the genius bill happens. So yeah, I mean, all our business is here, and Luther and I are located here, and some of the biggest consumer applications in banking, like Venmo, all they really did was abstract how bad our banking system is. Because in Venmo, what happens is if I send Luther money, he gets it instantly, he can withdraw to his bank account instantly. But really, they're debiting my ACH bank account, which takes 1 to 3 days to get. They're managing the fraud risk internally and fronting Luther the cash and then letting him withdraw, which is that's beautiful. Consumers don't know what's happening. They just know it's instant to send money. But Venmo did that and created a huge company. Same with Cash App, etc.
Yeah.
So if you take that same analogy and move it to business use case like marketplaces, for example, or gaming or whatever it is, like not everyone wants to build a unique fintech into their like marketplace, right? They want to just go sell like those watches like you want to sell, right?
Exactly.
You want to go sell watches, you don't want to go build a fintech, similar like that. So US has been a huge area for us. I think it'll continue to expand. And then globally, we're basically everywhere. Process cards globally in 170 plus countries, bank acceptance like 70 plus countries, etc. So really the vision is to connect all of the rails, whatever rail there is, to stablecoins and allow instant money in, instant money out for businesses. And one of the things of our thesis is that there's more and more networks coming out. Like example, in Brazil, Pix is like seen, considered a network, and it's taken off like Steam. India has UPI, etc. So more of these real-time payment networks, wallets, whatever it is, are coming out, which means that for a business accepting payments is only getting more disparate, and it's hard to connect all of them. And the one true source to connect all these things is going to be like this ultimate ledger, like you said, the blockchain with digital dollars to stable coins. So that's like, the future we see, and there has to be a payment company that helps merchants accept money through this way. So we think we're that.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. And I think also, I mean, it was Labor Day yesterday, but the rest of the world was working and it wanted to send money. How do you do it? You can't do it through your banks. Actually, stablecoins would have been a pretty good way to do it. So I imagine you would have actually had a lot of stablecoin transactions yesterday because a lot of people wouldn't have been able to send money during using the normal bank rails, actually.
Yeah, that's right. The coins were still flowing yesterday. They were flowing on Sunday. They were flowing on Saturday. So yeah, it's great. Like money moves all the time. Business is always happening. Like you can't just turn off the rails that move it.
Yeah.
I remember, like, from an acquiring perspective, right? In order to kind of stand up acquiring in a new country was such a big thing, right? You had to get Visa, MasterCard, blessing, right? Get the right licensing, get a sponsor bank in that country, and all that stuff. So, like, I love like that you guys are able to kind of provide a much more global service from that perspective. We talked about this earlier. You said like you settle merchants in fiat or stable coins, right? Dan, I think you said. Do you see potentially more merchants in like LATAM asking for stablecoin settlement, or merchants that are maybe fall under like they fall under a certain kind of, like, maybe the airlines or something like that. Like, is there a certain category of merchants, and is there a geographical location of a merchant that kind of dictates them to say, I will take stablecoin as a settlement versus fiat?
Yeah, well, right now we're technically selling everything through stablecoins. Then we can just turn it
Okay.
into fiat later. I would say there's a certain sector of merchants that are keeping it in stablecoins for longer than others. Eventually, for most, it still goes into fiat, which will probably be the case for a really long time, where like, they have to exit to the banking system at some point or through whatever traditional network system at some point. But yeah, the companies that do it, first and foremost, crypto native companies, exchanges, both on and off chain, etc. And then the ones that are keeping it longer in stables is, yes, like these remittance companies, payroll companies, etc., that are sending money to LATAM, Africa, Asia, etc., that want US dollar access. And then, you compose with another provider that issues cards you can spend off then. And yeah, they're keeping in stable coins a really long time. Sometimes never off-ramping to banks at all. So any of those markets, and I think, yeah, more and more types of companies will do that, but predominantly will be these things where you can keep it in the app forever, like a neobank, payroll, whatever is more like fintechy. Those are the companies that I think will, like, their end users will stay in stablecoin balance and spend off of it, use that, be able to send money in stablecoins to people if they need to get to the bank, and use those rails to off-ramp, etc. So yeah, having a lot of use cases there, but predominantly stablecoins is still just like the fastest method of transportation for money.
I have one question, actually, if possible. Do you see yourself offering, if the idea is that hopefully people will keep money in stablecoins in the app for longer and sort of stay on chain, do you as Coinflow propose to offer them yield-bearing services, other things that they can generate interest in the meantime through your infrastructure? Is that sort of a product development side, or do you leave that for the merchant to go and find different options themselves on the various products that are out there?
Yeah, we have some reward offering products already, and then we, as like a stablecoin PSP, we can settle into like a multitude of stablecoins. So like you mentioned, Ben, from Braille, we actually have a ton of companies that already settle into Braille-based stablecoins. So we can accept cards, bank transfers, etc., and we'll settle into that Braille-based stablecoin, and then they can get rewards from Braille directly. But we also have our own that we're starting to like test in beta and give it to people. I think it just makes so much sense that people will have their own type of money that has, they have control over it. People, meaning merchants or businesses, that they have their type of money, they get controls, they get the revenue from it as like rewards are generated, etc. And then our job will just be to settle into all of it, because I think that some people, the smaller ones, probably won't care if we have our own and do like a split. But if the whole value prop is to get as much rewards as possible, it's probably just better to go to Ben at Braille than than me and use my own and split 3 ways. It's probably just better to like go to him directly, get your own stable coin, and then just use Coinflow to settle. Our value prop is still that we can give you all these rails and then we'll settle into this new currency. So I think that's like end game in my mind is the more sophisticated companies. So whether like super tech advanced or larger, will have their own, because if one of the main value props is to earn as much as you can from it commercially, then like it makes sense not to have a third party that's not really needed there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, thinking, because there's sort of two ways this goes. One, I agree with you. I feel like we're just going into a stablecoin fragmentation era where so many people are going to issue their own stablecoins, and that has consequences necessarily with the liquidity. You might have to connect to more stablecoins, so that has its own sort of decision tree of things that you need to do. But then what you talked about earlier, which is the beautiful thing about stablecoins, like Luther mentioned, if you're standing up an offering in a new country, legislation, you've got to get the acquirer going, everything. But also the trapped cash, the capital that's there, that's not doing anything. The amount of money that is in Vostro and Nostro accounts around the world to give the illusion of real-time money movement, but it's not. It's just exactly as you described, Dan. It's like fronting money, basically taking the credit risk, taking the fraud risk, and just basically moving cash around all the time. This all gets abstracted away through efficient use of stablecoins and smart contracts, I think. So, we're going into a brave new world.
That's right.
Brave new world, my friend, for sure. We've talked about the plus points or the advantages of using stablecoins. What are, usually when we're talking to, I myself at Algorand or Rami, GMO Trust, like when we're talking to non-crypto folks, right? Like, so these are folks that have heard about stablecoins, they want to use stablecoins. What are some of the points that you kind of maybe, you kind of say, yeah, this is all the reasons why you should do it, but watch out for these 1 or 2 things that you may not have thought about from a stablecoin usage? Are there some things that come to mind, Dan, from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to like who you partner with. I think all the tools are there to like be like a success. Yeah. But the ecosystem's so nascent and people don't have knowledge. Like, I worked in consulting at PwC. We consulted banks, other like huge institutions of like, how to do fintech implementations. And we had a list of trusted vendors. We had all this stuff. Like, you don't have that here. It's kind of like, it's not Wild Wild West, but the ecosystem is not nascent, but it's nascent with service providers that can like be a guiding hand, etc., and like architect this system that you need properly with the reliable solutions. So I think that's the biggest thing to like what I tell people watch out for is like you don't have to use Coinflow, but make sure like whoever you go and use, either for like payment acceptance or whatever part of the stack that you're gonna build, go like figure out how to do diligence and like actually make sure this works and they can do this. Because like Rami said this, everyone's getting to stablecoin issuance and it's gonna be fragmented, but like how many people have actually deployed real programs at scale successfully? There's not that many. Who actually has the tech? How is it battle tested, etc. So I think that's like the biggest part right now is like a lot of people are building for a long time. It's different to build and like actually have your tech be used in the limelight. So that's the part where I tell people watch out for is I think everything's there. It's just like make sure what you're sourcing it from, you're getting the stuff that you need from the right people.
You're spot on. I think that's so in traditional fintech land, if you wanted to go from selling an object and to receiving funds, like it's as simple. I mean, if you're small, you can just go get a Square device or whatever, and then you're up and running, right? Like if you're larger, then there's lots of ones that give you like that. Here's a package thing. Like here's step 1 to 3, and then you're up and running. You're right. Like I think in our space, there's still a little bit of like, because I've said this before to people, I've said it's more than just getting a Circle Mint account. Like that's just the beginning. That's like step one, right? And then you need to kind of figure out like, how do we, like, who's going to custody this for us? Like, are we going to custody with Circle? There's all these things, like, how are we going to move it? How is liquidity going to manage? There's all these moving pieces that I think hopefully over the next few months, to your point though, Dan, like we start to see companies that kind of provide like that package deal, like,
Yeah, like the managed service.
Yeah, the managed service is 100%, right? For those that are coming to the space and not like, okay, now that you're here, go get a PhD in this stuff before you can use it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So we do a lot of that. We try to, but it's the more creative you get in the space, like the managed service compounds. So like kind of what Rami was saying, like, hey, like if you want to, do a deeper split payments, like, okay, well, cool, we only developed this managed service for like the one layer split. You have to go and like figure out your own wallet infrastructure and like how to write a smart contract or whatever. So yeah, it's tough because the amount of options is now infinite because you can like literally program and do whatever.
Which is also dangerous.
It's dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. We're beginning to wrap up here, Dan. Where can people find you, and where's the best way for them to get in touch of Coinflow?
Yeah, our website's coinflow.cash. We have a link on there or a book a call to the team on there, and just hit us up there and we can definitely chat. You mentioned my LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Daniel Lev. And if you search Coinflow, I think I'll pop up. Basically, any big crypto conference, fintech conference, I'm there. Very easily find.
It's amazing. I think any traditional merchant services person looking at the space, any traditional merchant who hasn't yet added crypto or stablecoins to their mix should be looking at you guys, or who is willing to take the leap of faith and say, everything stays the same, but you guys take care of the complexity of stablecoins on the back end, and nothing changes for them. I think that this is prime for them to make that change.
Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you listening, please check out coinflow.cash if you're looking for global credit card acceptance. That's it for this week from Rami and myself. We put out episodes every other week from the Stablecoin podcast. Please like and subscribe.